I read a comment from Jamie the other day, and Jamie was saying that she was in the middle of her home purchase and the negotiated price was $550,000. But to her surprise, when she got the appraisal back, this was set at $500,000. And she wasn't really sure what to do. Should she walk out of her house or should she try to negotiate the pricing with the seller? But she was afraid that she might lose on the property should the seller deny her request to bring the purchase price down. So what I replied to her was, don't worry, this can actually be a blessing in disguise. And here's how. Welcome to Nova Rice, your channel for financial education. In here, we talk about investments in real estate, investments in the stock market, in precious metals, and small businesses. So in case you're new to real estate, let me explain you how the whole appraisal system works. So this typically is required if you were to purchase a home using a mortgage. So the lender wants to make sure that whatever you're buying is actually worth what the price was negotiated. So what the bank does is that they hire a professional, in this case an appraiser, and this person will go out and take a look at the property. It will take a look at the number of bedrooms, baths, how large the house is, the features that it has, maybe an upgraded kitchen with marble countertops, or whatever makes that property unique or whatever makes up the property what it is, right? And then this appraisal will take this information and it's going to start looking for similar properties in the area within the same zip code to see what prices has it sold in the past. So that's why they say, oh, I need to look at the comparables, because the prices of the prior homes sold, it's going to be used as a benchmark to compare that to the house that you're about to buy. So if you happen to be in a market where there's a lot of movement, a lot of closings, a lot of sales, that appraisal can turn around relatively quickly and it will provide you the most up-to-date pricing possible, probably with the pricing that is in the range of what you negotiated with the seller. However, if your market hasn't experienced much of a movement lately, this appraisal will have to dig in a little further. So this professional is going to have to go back a couple of years, 1 or 2 maybe, in order to find that information. And then it's going to have to adjust those comparable prices and adjust it to inflation to come up with a pricing today. Now, mind you that this professional is using a formula to come up with the pricing based on historical data. And in that instance, it could sometimes come up short, meaning that whatever price the appraiser assigns to your property, that could be a little lower than the actual negotiated price between you and the seller. So when that happens, there are 2 scenarios that could resolve out of this. One, that you take the appraisal report and you go back to the seller and you negotiate and ask the seller to bring the price down. So let's say, for example, if the purchase price that was negotiated was $550,000 and the appraisal came back at $500,000, then you can ask the seller to bring the price down to $500,000 or ask to see if there's any concessions that are equivalent to $50,000 that you can receive. So that way it will make up for like the difference that you have to pay. That's in an ideal scenario. But if you're in a very competitive market, typically the seller is going to say yay or nay, like take it or leave it, right? I have plenty of other offers waiting for me. So it is up to you if you want to come up with the difference or just simply walk away from the deal altogether. But let's say maybe you fell in love with the house and this is the exact house that you want, or that maybe you run the numbers if it's an investment property and it just turns out that it was too good to pass on. So there are other things that you can do. And like I said, the fact that the appraisal came back shorter than the actual negotiated price is actually a blessing in disguise. So yes, you will have to come up with the difference of $50,000, assuming a purchase price of $550,000 and an appraisal of $500,000. Yes, you will have to come up with the additional $50,000. However, you are still saving a lot of money in the long run. And this is how you're going to structure the deal. This is how you're going to negotiate with the seller. So you agree to pay the $550,000. However, you're going to ask the seller to make changes to the contract. So instead of buying the house on paper at $550,000, you can ask the seller to bring the price down so that it will match whatever the appraisal came back with. So that way, on paper, you're actually purchasing the house at $500,000. So that contract, you're going to take it to the lender, and then you're going to tell them, hey, based on the appraisal, this is the new purchase price that is negotiated. Can you please readjust the mortgage? And that would automatically trigger a bunch of changes. And a lot of those are actually positive changes. So let's say, for example, if you were to buy your house at $550,000 in the contract, that means that 20% of that as a down payment would have been $110,000. But because you asked the seller to update the contract to $500,000, now the down payment of 20% of that is $100,000. So in a way, you already freed up $10,000 that you wouldn't have to put towards the down payment, but you can actually use those $10,000 to put towards the difference that you will be paying cash to the seller. So in a way, you're still buying the house for $550,000, but the changes that we're seeing now on paper is going to trigger a series of savings. One of them is a reduction in the down payment, and you're repurposing that $10,000 to be able to pay the seller cash for the difference. So $550,000, that was the original negotiated price, minus $500,000, which is the price that came back at the appraisal. That means you're going to have to pay an additional $50,000 out of your pocket. But because you already restructured the contract, now you freed up $10,000, and $50,000 minus $10,000, that means now you only worry about coming up with the remaining $40,000. Now, it's still a large amount, but looking at the positive, you already reduced that from $50,000 to $40,000. In addition to that, because you already negotiated a lower pricing, that means that on the finance side, you're going to be financing less money. So if we go back to the example of the original price, $550,000 minus $110,000, that means that the loan amount would have been $440,000. So that means that your original loan would have been for that amount. But because you lowered that price in the contract to a new purchase price of $500,000 minus the $100,000 down payment, that means you're only financing $400,000. And when you factor that in a mortgage of 30 years, that is a significant saving on interest in the long run. So you are, in fact, saving a lot of money due to the restructuring of this purchase contract. Based on how you look at things, some of you might say, well, I don't think this is fair because even though the contract is lower in price, I still have to come up with the difference. And so far, I have been able to come up with only $10,000 based on your example. What else can I do to come up with the rest? Well, if that's the case, here is a video that you can watch and where I share multiple creative ways to come up with the money for the down payment. And I did it on a $2 million deal. So if I did it, you can do it too. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.